There have been a multitude of franchises created by Nintendo across their systems, as well as a ton of one-off games and exclusives. Smash Bros. Represents a pretty large portion of that history, but there are plenty of games and series that have gone without any kind of representation at all. I'm going to cover a few of those titles in this video, but this is a subject I'm going to come back to over time. It's a pretty extensive list of series. To start off, I will go with the series that I think is the most obvious choice, Punch-Out! Punch-Out! Started as an arcade game in the 80s and continued into adaptations for the NES and Super Nintendo. The series was dead for a very long time after that, until it was revived on the Wii with motion control. The obvious character for Punch-Out! Is Little Mac, the main character of the series, who made an appearance in Brawl as an assist trophy. He's been the star of every game in the series so far as a stand-in for the player. He is a boxer. It's pretty self-explanatory. He wears gloves and punches guys a lot. Little Mac is probably one of the most obvious additions that could be made to Smash Bros. Despite the series being on hiatus for such a long time, Punch-Out! Was a phenomenon when it was still getting releases. For people like me who grew up on the NES and the Super Nintendo, Little Mac is an iconic character. It's anecdotal, but honestly, back in the days of the NES and the Super NES, Punch-Out! Was just as big of a name as Zelda or Mario to most of the people that I knew, and it was easily more popular than series like Ice Climbers or Kid Icarus. I'd go so far as to say that Little Mac is probably the most iconic Nintendo character yet to be playable in Smash Bros. As a character, Little Mac hits all of the points needed to make him worthwhile. Ironically enough, the only thing he really lacks that's immediately apparent is a good moveset. Little Mac is a boxer, but he doesn't really have a lot of options for special moves given the games that he's appeared in. I don't think that's a negative in this instance. Little Mac's a boxer, so a moveset in which he punches things is pretty obvious and easy to create. For a little extra flair, they could incorporate some command-style dodges or counter moves into his fighting style, similar to Dudley from Street Fighter III. I definitely think it fits in line with the character and how you have to dodge moves and attacks in the Punch-Out! Series. I think Little Mac's an obvious pick. I'm not the world's biggest fan of Punch-Out!, but if I had to pick one character in all of Nintendo's history that deserves a slot in the game, it'd probably be him. The next option/series is Custom Robo. Custom Robo is one of the lesser-known gems in Nintendo's backlog. The series is about tiny little fighting robots controlled by people. It's basically just taking the concept of BattleBots, only with Japanese-style mecha. The series hasn't ever been hugely popular, there's only 5 games, and of those 5, only 2 of them have made it to the States. However, the series did manage to get an assist trophy in Brawl in the form of Ray Mark II, and the Ray model would indeed be the best representative for the series. That said, this is kind of a weird aspect for Custom Robo. All the robots in Custom Robo are tiny, only a foot tall. Ray can easily be scaled up to the size of other characters, but at this point he looks more like a guy in a robot costume fighting. I think for the design it would be necessary to highlight the robotic qualities of the character, and the rep would definitely need to be one of the robots. Custom Robo is a lot like Pokemon, where the human characters in the series don't actually do anything on their own. They use robots for everything, so a human character would be a little bit boring. And let's face it, Custom Robo's not the most popular series in the world. I've played both of the English games and I can't even name one of the human characters. Thankfully, Ray, or Ray Mark II, or one of the other Ray models, as a character would have a lot of moveset potential. Actually, the games provide a Smash Bros. Moveset pretty much perfectly. Custom Robo equipment gets assigned to 4 different slots: a gun, a bomb, a backpack, and legs. It doesn't take a whole lot of imagination to apply those to the 4 different special move prompts, especially since the games have a million different functions that could be assigned to each. Additionally, the Ray Mark II model is kind of the standard model for Custom Robo. It's usually the first one you get, and usually later on in the games you get upgraded versions of it. It's the equivalent of Ryu to Street Fighter for the Custom Robo series. Finally, there is one of my favorite Nintendo series, Advance Wars, aka Game Boy Wars, aka Famicom Wars, aka Battalion Wars. It has a lot of names. It's known in the West with a series of titles in the Game Boy Advance and DS, but as the name Famicom Wars might suggest, it's been out for a lot longer in Japan. It's a turn-based strategy series where players use color-coded armies to kill each other. The most obvious character choice for the series is probably Andy. Andy is the protagonist, kind of, for the Game Boy Advance versions of the games. He's a CO, a commanding officer, one of the characters that you can pick to lead your armies. The games will often let you control multiple characters, but Andy, or someone that's very similar to Andy, is almost always the first one available. Now, the initial problem with Advance Wars is that it's a violent series in a way that Nintendo games are not normally violent. It features realistic guns, tanks, and everything you'd expect out of a turn-based war game. Andy actually does a good job of circumventing this. His specialty in the games is repairing things, and he carries around a giant wrench. It'd be pretty easy to envision a moveset in which he fights with an oversized wrench while using other mechanical tools and vehicles from the series to attack with. Andy might be the obvious choice for the series, but he's not the only one. I actually have a pick that I like a bit better. Hawke. Warning, incoming spoilers for Advance Wars 2 and Advance Wars Dual Strike. Hawke first appeared in Advance Wars 2 as the main antagonist. However, he eventually ends up betraying the real antagonist, Sturm, also the antagonist of the first Game Boy Advance game, at the end of this game. This happens again in Advance Wars Dual Strike, and he actually ends up joining the protagonists and fighting against that game's enemy as well. In both games, Hawke is actually responsible for the death of the villain, taking out both Sturm and Von Bolt. There's a couple of reasons I think Hawke works as a better representative than Andy does. The main one is that Hawke is one of the few characters to appear in both Advance Wars and Advance Wars Dual Strike. Andy was dropped as a character after the first two games on the Game Boy Advance, and we haven't seen him since. I'd also argue that Hawke, being a serious military commander that is also a serious badass in the game's universe, is probably a more appropriate character for the series than a happy-go-lucky shonen hero protagonist. Honestly, Andy's kind of a boring character. He's not really a popular character either, and Advance Wars isn't a huge series, so I think they could get away with using Hawke instead of Andy without ruffling any feathers. Hawke's also got the sort of classic anti-hero-ish persona, like your Virgil or your MetaKnight. He's arrogant and overly sure of himself, but he's also an honorable fighter. There's another major reason that I think Hawke would work, and that reason is Solid Snake. The problem that I mentioned earlier about representing graphic violence in Smash Bros. Has already been solved through the use of Solid Snake, who uses explosives and martial arts combat instead of guns for Brawl. I don't actually think Solid Snake is going to return for Super Smash Bros. I'll get into it a little more in depth when I talk about third-party characters, but Solid Snake just doesn't have a whole lot of association with Nintendo, and recent developments with Metal Gear Solid have made Solid Snake a little less likely. My solution to that would be to give Solid Snake's moveset over to Hawke. They've got a similar body shape and style, so it could work. Solid Snake had such a popular moveset and such a unique moveset that it would be a shame to lose it, and I think that giving it to Hawke would be a great way to keep it in the game. It could basically be the exact same moveset, but maybe update it with a bit more Advance Wars looking technology and items. Now, all of these series have pretty much the same problem: relevance. Punch-Out is a pretty popular series, but it didn't have a release for years, and it doesn't seem like we're getting one anytime soon. Advance Wars and Custom Robo are C-level series for Nintendo, at best, which isn't bad in and of itself, but they haven't had any new releases in quite some time. Showing up in Smash Bros. Can be a great way to advertise for a series to make a revival, but the relevance for these characters to a modern Nintendo is still a problem for them appearing in the game. I don't think these are the only new series options from Nintendo, but I'm going to detail more of them in later videos. As always, I want to know what you think. Feel free to comment on the options I've laid out here, and suggest some of your own, and maybe I'll cover them in future videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll have another video up next week.